"Daddy, I don't want them to laugh at you," the little girl whispered in fear. But when the single dad stood up at the gala, what he did next made the entire room freeze in stunned silence. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. The autumn sun had already dipped below the horizon when Marcus Johnson's old pickup truck pulled into the small apartment complex. His shoulders ached from hours bent over engines, and the smell of motor oil clung to his work uniform despite his best efforts to stay clean. The familiar crunch of gravel under his work boots brought a small comfort that he was finally home. Before he could even reach for his keys, the door flew open. There stood Lila, her bright eyes dancing with excitement, and her schoolwork clutched tightly against her chest. Her purple backpack lay abandoned by the door, contents spilling onto the welcome mat. "Daddy, you're home!" Lila launched herself at him, careful not to wrinkle the papers in her hand. Marcus caught her in a tight hug, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Hey, baby girl," he said softly, breathing in the coconut scent of her hair products. "How was school today?" Lila pulled back, practically bouncing on her toes. "I got an A on my science project. Miss Thompson said my presentation about the water cycle was the best in class." She thrust the paper toward him, complete with a gold star sticker in the corner. Marcus's face broke into a proud smile as he studied the perfectly neat handwriting and carefully drawn diagrams. That's my girl, always reaching for the stars. They made their way inside their modest two-bedroom apartment. The space was small but tidy, with family photos lining the walls and Lila's artwork displayed proudly on the refrigerator. The air still held the lingering scent of this morning's breakfast, cinnamon from the oatmeal he'd made before dawn. "I already did most of my other homework," Lila announced, following him to the kitchen. "But I saved my reading assignment so we could do it together." Marcus nodded as he pulled out last night's meatloaf from the fridge. "Just let me warm this up first, okay?" While the microwave hummed, Marcus sorted through the day's mail, bills, advertisements, and then his hands froze on a thick, cream-colored envelope with gold lettering. His employer's logo gleamed in the corner. The microwave beeped, but Marcus barely noticed. With careful fingers, he opened the envelope and pulled out an elegant card. "What's that, Daddy?" Lila asked, peering around his arm. Marcus cleared his throat. It's an invitation. The auto shop owner, Mr. Henderson, is hosting some kind of fancy charity event, and he's invited me to attend." Lila's eyes widened. "Like a party? With fancy dresses and everything? A gala?" Marcus read from the card, the unfamiliar word feeling strange in his mouth. 2 weeks from Saturday, at the Grand Plaza Hotel downtown. He set the card down and divided the meatloaf onto 2 plates, adding leftover green beans that had seen better days. They sat at their small kitchen table, the invitation lying between them like some kind of mysterious artifact. "Can I come too?" Lila asked around a mouthful of food. Marcus glanced at the invitation again. "It says, +1. I suppose that means you could." "Really?" Lila's fork clattered against her plate. "I've never been to a fancy party before. Can I wear my Easter dress, the blue one with the ribbons?" Marcus pushed his food around his plate, his appetite diminishing. "We'll see, baby, we'll see." As they ate, Lila chattered excitedly about what the party might be like, her imagination running wild with visions of crystal chandeliers and chocolate fountains. But Marcus's mind was elsewhere, calculating the cost of a proper suit, wondering if his old dress shoes could be shined up enough to pass inspection. "Will there be important people there?" Lila asked, finally pausing for breath. Marcus nodded slowly. "Mr. Henderson said it's to raise money for youth programs in the city. There'll be all kinds of business owners and rich folks there. And you'll get to talk to them all," Lila beamed. "Are you excited, Daddy?" Marcus forced his lips into what he hoped was a convincing smile. "Of course I am. I'm going to make you proud, baby girl. Make everyone proud." But the smile didn't quite reach his eyes, and something in his voice must have given him away, because Lila's expression softened with concern. She reached across the table and put her small hand over his larger one. "You already make me proud, Daddy." Marcus swallowed hard and squeezed her hand gently. "Time for bed, sweetheart. Don't forget to brush your teeth." After tucking Lila in with a story and a kiss goodnight, Marcus returned to the kitchen. The dishes sat unwashed in the sink, but he couldn't bring himself to tackle them just yet. Instead, he sank into his chair at the table, picking up the invitation with trembling fingers. The words blurred before his eyes. Black tie required. Distinguished guests. Charitable giving. Each phrase seemed to mock him, reminding him of a world he'd never been part of. His calloused hands, permanently stained with traces of motor oil, didn't belong among crystal champagne flutes and silver spoons. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. Marcus sat there, alone with his fears and doubts, the invitation growing heavier in his hands with each passing moment. The chance to step into that glittering world felt less like an opportunity and more like a test he wasn't sure he could pass. Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror, its surface marred by a thin crack that zigzagged across the corner like a lightning bolt. The flickering fluorescent light cast harsh shadows on his face as he adjusted the borrowed tie that felt more like a noose around his neck. His neighbor, Mr. Washington, had lent it to him, a navy blue piece that had seen better days but was still presentable enough for the gala. "Good evening. I'm Marcus Johnson, lead mechanic at Henderson Auto," he practiced, trying to smooth out the natural warmth in his voice into something more formal. The words came out stiff, like a robot attempting human speech. He grimaced and tried again. "Marcus Johnson, senior automotive technician." Too technical. He loosened the tie slightly, his reflection showing beads of sweat forming on his forehead, despite the cool evening air drifting through the small bathroom window. The worn linoleum floor creaked beneath his feet as he shifted his weight. In the harsh bathroom lighting, his one good suit, purchased years ago for a friend's wedding, showed its age. The fabric at the elbows had grown thin, and despite his best efforts with an iron, stubborn wrinkles refused to release their hold on the pants. "A pleasure to meet you. I specialize in European imports and domestic." Marcus trailed off, shaking his head. He braced his hands against the sink, the cool porcelain grounding him as anxiety churned in his stomach. The invitation sat on the counter, its elegant script seeming to mock his attempts at refinement. He straightened up, squaring his shoulders like he used to do in the military. "Hello. I served 8 years in the Army before joining Henderson Auto." No, that sounded like he was at a job interview. Marcus ran a hand over his closely cropped hair, the gray at his temples more visible than ever. "Perhaps if I..." He cleared his throat and attempted to mimic the polished tone he'd heard from clients who brought in their luxury cars. "Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted to..." His voice caught. The words felt foreign in his mouth, like ill-fitting dentures. This wasn't him. The man in the mirror looked like a stranger. Uncomfortable, uncertain, trying to be something he wasn't. "The pleasure is mine, Madam Chairman," he tried again, exaggerating his enunciation. "I'm honored to be invited to this distinguished gathering." The words echoed hollowly in the small bathroom, each syllable more artificial than the last. From the living room, the old wall clock ticked steadily, marking time as Marcus continued his practice performance. Each attempt felt more forced than the last. He experimented with different stances, hands clasped behind his back, then in front, then one hand casually in his pocket like he'd seen executives do. "I look forward to discussing the Foundation's charitable initiatives." He stumbled over initiatives, the word tangling on his tongue. Frustration burned in his chest as he started over. Again. And again. The bathroom light flickered, casting momentary shadows that made his reflection dance. Marcus adjusted his tie for the 100th time, tugging at the knot that never seemed quite right. His fingers, strong and capable with engine parts, felt clumsy with the silk. "Your organization's commitment to community development." He stopped, the rehearsed phrases sounding hollow even to his own ears. These weren't his words. This wasn't his world. The elegant ballroom he'd seen in the invitation photos might as well have been on another planet. The more he practiced, the more foreign each phrase became. His natural warmth, the easy way he had with his customers at the shop, disappeared beneath layers of forced sophistication. He was trying to speak a language he'd never learned, to fit into a world that hadn't made room for men like him. Distinguished guests, esteemed colleagues. His voice cracked slightly. Sweat dampened the collar of his shirt despite the cool evening air. The mirror reflected his discomfort in harsh detail, the tension in his shoulders, the strain around his eyes, the way his hands couldn't seem to find a natural position. A small movement caught his eye in the mirror's reflection. There, barely visible in the doorway, stood Lila in her pajamas, her dark eyes wide with concern. She must have heard him practicing, must have sensed his struggle. Their eyes met in the mirror, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then, in a whisper that seemed to fill the entire bathroom, Lila said the words that made Marcus's heart stop. "Daddy, I don't want them to laugh at you." Marcus froze, his rehearsed words dying in his throat. His daughter's honest concern cut deeper than any criticism could have, laying bare all his fears and insecurities. In the cracked mirror, he saw himself as she must see him, her strong, capable father, trying so hard to be someone else that he was losing himself in the process. The morning sun cast long shadows across the cracked sidewalk as Marcus and Lila walked hand in hand toward her school bus stop. The autumn air was crisp, making their breaths visible in small, wispy clouds. Marcus's mind kept circling back to Lila's words from the night before. "Daddy, I don't want them to laugh at you." Those simple words had kept him awake most of the night. Each time he closed his eyes, he imagined himself standing in a room full of wealthy people, their judgmental stares cutting through him like knives. The thought made his stomach churn. Lila skipped beside him, her purple backpack bouncing with each step, completely unaware of her father's inner turmoil. She hummed a tune from her favorite cartoon show, occasionally pointing out interesting shapes in the passing clouds. "Look, Daddy, that one looks like a dinosaur." She tugged at his sleeve, her face bright with excitement. Marcus managed to smile, but his thoughts remained heavy. Maybe he should just make up an excuse, tell his boss he was sick, or that Lila needed him that night. Anything to avoid putting himself in a situation where he might embarrass himself and worse, disappoint his daughter. As they approached the bus stop, Marcus noticed a familiar face. James Carter, a fellow veteran he knew from his military days, stood waiting with his own kid. James caught his eye and nodded in greeting. "Hey, brother," James called out, his voice warm and welcoming. "How you been?" "Managing," Marcus replied, trying to sound more confident than he felt. While their kids chatted about an upcoming school project, James studied Marcus's face. "Something eating at you?" "You got that look." Marcus hesitated, then decided to confide in his old friend. They'd been through tough times together, and James had always given him straight talk when he needed it. "Got invited to some fancy charity gala at work. Been thinking about skipping it." "Yeah? Why's that?" Marcus lowered his voice so the kids wouldn't hear. "You know how these things are, James. All those rich folks looking down their noses at us, acting like we should be grateful just to be in the room." James crossed his arms, his expression serious. "Remember that time in basic training when you wanted to quit because the drill sergeant kept riding you harder than everyone else?" "That was different," Marcus protested. "Was it?" James raised an eyebrow. "You were ready to run then too. But you didn't. And you ended up being the best shot in our unit." The yellow school bus appeared at the end of the street, its diesel engine rumbling in the morning quiet. Lila gave Marcus a quick hug goodbye, then joined the line of kids waiting to board. James put a hand on Marcus's shoulder. "Look, brother, discomfort is just a signal that you're growing. Running from it? That's like letting them win without even showing up for the fight." Marcus watched as Lila climbed the bus steps, turning to wave at him through the window. He waved back, his heart swelling with love and pride. "Besides," James continued, "you've got something none of those rich folks have. You've got real stories, real struggles, real triumph. That matters more than knowing which fork to use for the salad." The bus pulled away, and Marcus stood there, letting James's words sink in. His friend was right. Running away wouldn't teach Lila the lessons he wanted her to learn about facing challenges head-on. Throughout the day at the auto shop, Marcus thought about what James had said. As he worked under cars and changed oil, he remembered all the obstacles he'd already overcome in his life. The military had taught him discipline and courage. Being a single father had taught him patience and unconditional love. Those experiences were part of who he was. Why should he try to hide them? That evening, after dinner, Marcus sat with Lila on their worn but comfortable couch. She was working on her math homework, her pencil making soft scratching sounds against the paper. "Baby girl," he said softly, "remember what you said last night about not wanting them to laugh at me?" Lila put down her pencil and looked up at him, her eyes serious. "Yes, Daddy. Well, I've been thinking about that all day. And you know what? You were right to worry. I was trying to be something I'm not." "What do you mean?" Marcus shifted to face her better. "I was practicing how to talk like those rich folks, trying to use fancy words and act all proper. But that's not who I am, and that's not who I want to be." Lila's face brightened with understanding. "So you're not going to the party?" "No, baby. I'm going to go." He took her small hand in his. "But I'm going to go as myself. I'm going to tell them my story, our story, just the way it is. No fancy words, no pretending. Just the truth about who we are and what we believe in." "You mean like how you always tell me to be myself at school?" Marcus smiled, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. "Exactly like that. Your daddy might not know all the proper ways to act at a fancy party, but he knows who he is, and that's something to be proud of, not ashamed of." Lila launched herself forward, wrapping her arms around his neck in a tight hug. "That's the daddy I believe in," she whispered against his shoulder. Marcus held her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo. In that moment, he knew he'd made the right decision. Whatever happened at the gala, he would face it with dignity and authenticity. Because that's what his daughter needed to see, not a father who could perfectly imitate the wealthy, but one who could stand tall in his own truth. The bell above Pete's second chances jingled as Marcus pushed open the heavy glass door. The familiar scent of mothballs and fabric softener filled his nostrils. Racks of pre-owned clothing lined the narrow aisles, each item telling its own story of previous lives and occasions. Marcus ran his hand along a row of suit jackets, feeling the different textures beneath his fingertips. Some were worn smooth at the elbows, others still carried a hint of stiffness in their shoulders. His calloused hands, bearing the marks of years of auto repair work, seemed out of place among the formal wear. "Can I help you find something specific?" A deep, weathered voice called out from behind the alterations counter. Marcus turned to find Mr. Pete himself, his silver-rimmed glasses perched on his nose, measuring tape draped around his neck like a badge of office. The old tailor's dark skin was creased with age, but his eyes sparkled with vitality. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied, clearing his throat. "I need a suit for a charity gala. Something." He hesitated, embarrassed. "Something affordable." Mr. Pete nodded knowingly, no judgment in his expression. "Follow me." He moved with purpose through the racks, occasionally pausing to consider a piece before moving on. "What kind of work do you do, son?" "I'm a mechanic at Johnson's Auto," Marcus answered, following close behind. "Ah," Mr. Pete said, pulling out a charcoal gray suit. "Strong hands, then. We'll need something with room in the shoulders." He held the suit up against Marcus's frame, studying the fit with expert eyes. "This one's got good bones. Previous owner barely wore it." Marcus checked the price tag and felt a small wave of relief. It was within his budget, though just barely. "Could I try it on?" Mr. Pete led him to a small changing room with a full-length mirror. The fluorescent lighting was harsh, highlighting every wrinkle and imperfection in the suit. Marcus changed carefully, mindful of the delicate fabric. When he emerged, Mr. Pete circled him slowly, making small sounds of consideration. "Stand up straight now," he instructed, making minute adjustments to how the suit sat on Marcus's shoulders. "I don't know," Marcus said, staring at his reflection. "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea." "Now hold on," Mr. Pete said firmly. He stepped in front of Marcus, adjusting the lapels with practiced hands. "Let me tell you something about suits." People think the suit makes the man, but that's backward. It's the man who makes the suit. Marcus met the older man's eyes in the mirror. I've never been to anything like this before, he admitted quietly. A fancy charity gala. I'm worried I'll stick out. Mr. Pete's hands stilled on Marcus's shoulders. You probably will, he said honestly. But not because of this suit. Listen to me carefully, young man. Dignity isn't in the fabric, but in the man who wears it. I've dressed millionaires who couldn't carry themselves with half the natural dignity you walked in here with. The words settled over Marcus like a warm blanket. Mr. Pete began marking the suit with pins, working with quiet efficiency. My daughter, Marcus said softly. She's worried they'll laugh at me. Smart girl, Mr. Pete replied, marking another adjustment. She knows the world can be unkind, but she needs to see her daddy stand tall anyway. That's how we change things, one straight backbone at a time. After the fitting, Marcus waited while Mr. Pete made the initial adjustments. The shop was quiet except for the gentle whir of the sewing machine and the distant sound of traffic outside. Marcus thought about Mr. Pete's words, about dignity and straight backbones. When the alterations were done, Marcus carefully placed the suit in his car and drove home. The apartment building's stairs creaked under his feet as he climbed to their third-floor unit. Inside, Lila was at the kitchen table, colored pencils scattered around her homework. "Daddy!" she exclaimed, jumping up from her chair. "Did you get it? Can I see?" Marcus held up the garment bag with a small smile. "Want to help me try it on?" Lila nodded eagerly, following him to his bedroom. Marcus changed while she waited outside, then called her in. She gasped when she saw him, her eyes wide with wonder. "You look so handsome," she breathed, circling him just as Mr. Pete had done earlier. Then she frowned slightly, pointing at his arms. "But Daddy, the sleeves." Marcus looked down. Despite Mr. Pete's best efforts, the sleeves were still a bit short, revealing too much of his wrists. He felt his heart sink a little, but before he could say anything, Lila grabbed his hand. "You'll still look like a king," she declared firmly, squeezing his fingers. Her face shone with such pure pride that Marcus felt his throat tighten with emotion. Looking at their reflection in the bedroom mirror, father and daughter, his ill-fitting suit, and her absolute conviction, Marcus understood what Mr. Pete had meant about dignity. It wasn't about the suit at all. It was about standing tall for his daughter, about showing her that her father could walk into any room with his head held high. The sleeves might be too short, but Lila was right. In her eyes, he was already royalty. The borrowed Camry hummed quietly as Marcus guided it through the evening traffic. His hands gripped the steering wheel a bit too tightly, his knuckles turning pale against his dark skin. Next to him, Lila pressed her face against the window, her breath fogging the glass as she watched the city transform into a wonderland of lights. "Look, Daddy, everything's so sparkly," she exclaimed, pointing at the rows of trees wrapped in twinkling white lights along the boulevard. Marcus managed a small smile, grateful for his daughter's infectious enthusiasm. "Sure is, baby girl." He adjusted his borrowed tie for the 100th time. Mrs. Rodriguez from next door had not only lent them her car but had also helped knot it properly before they left. The silk felt foreign against his neck, so different from the cottonwork shirts he wore at the auto shop. As they approached downtown, the buildings grew taller, their glass facades reflecting the setting sun in brilliant orange and pink hues. Lila's eyes grew wider with each block they passed. Her purple dress, a lucky find at the thrift store, rustled as she bounced in her seat. "Are we almost there?" she asked, smoothing down her carefully braided hair. Marcus had spent an hour that morning getting each plait just right, his rough mechanic's hands working with surprising gentleness. "Just about, sweetheart." Marcus checked the invitation card propped on the dashboard one more time. The Grand Palmer Hotel should be right around this corner. When the hotel came into view, Lila gasped. The limestone building rose majestically above the street, its entrance marked by a sweeping red canopy and golden light spilling onto the sidewalk. Well-dressed people moved in and out through the revolving doors, their jewelry catching the light like stars. Marcus's stomach tightened as he pulled up to the valet station. A young man in a red vest approached the driver's side window, and Marcus had to remind himself that he belonged here, invitation or not. "Good evening, sir," the valet said, opening Marcus's door with practiced efficiency. "Welcome to the Palmer." Marcus stepped out, tugging at his suit jacket. The sleeves were still a touch too short, despite the tailor's best efforts. He hurried around to open Lila's door, offering his hand like they'd practiced at home. "Thank you, kind sir," Lila said with an exaggerated curtsy that made Marcus's heart swell. Even here, among all this grandeur, his little girl could make him smile. They stood for a moment on the sidewalk, taking in the scene. The entrance was flanked by massive marble columns, and crystal chandeliers were visible through the lobby windows. Marcus felt Lila's small hand slip into his, and he squeezed it gratefully. "Remember what we said?" he whispered as they approached the revolving door. Lila nodded solemnly. "Be yourself, Daddy. That's more than enough." The lobby was a cathedral of luxury. Their shoes sank into deep carpets, patterned in gold and burgundy. The ceiling soared 2 stories high, dominated by a chandelier that seemed to float like a constellation above their heads. The air smelled of fresh flowers and expensive perfume. Well-heeled guests milled about, their conversations creating a gentle murmur that echoed off the marble walls. Marcus felt painfully aware of every detail of his appearance: the slightly worn shoes, the second-hand suit, the tie that didn't quite match. But Lila walked beside him with her head held high, and he tried to mirror her confidence. A woman in a black dress approached them, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Johnson?" Her smile was professional but warm. "I'm Amanda, one of the event coordinators. We're so pleased you could join us tonight." Marcus nodded, finding his voice. "Thank you for having us. This is my daughter, Lila." Lila gave a small wave, and Amanda's smile broadened. "What a lovely young lady. Please follow me. The ballroom is just through here." They followed Amanda down a wide hallway lined with gilt-framed mirrors. Marcus caught glimpses of their reflection as they walked, father and daughter, walking tall despite their borrowed finery, their hands still clasped together. The ballroom doors were already open, revealing a space that took Lila's breath away. Round tables draped in white linen filled the room, each one set with china that gleamed under the warm lighting. Crystal glasses caught the light like prisms, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the tablecloths. "Daddy," Lila whispered. "It's like a fairy tale." More guests were arriving now, filing past them in designer dresses and perfectly tailored suits. Marcus felt the familiar urge to shrink back, to make himself smaller, but Lila's presence anchored him. Her innocent wonder at the spectacle reminded him why he was here, not just for himself, but for her future. Amanda led them to a table near the front of the room, close to a raised platform where a podium stood. "You'll be seated here, Mr. Johnson. We've scheduled your remarks for just after the first course." Marcus's throat went dry at the sight of the podium, but he managed to thank her. As they settled into their seats, Lila immediately began arranging her napkin in her lap, just like they'd practiced with paper towels at their kitchen table. The room filled quickly with the city's elite, business owners, politicians, old money families whose names Marcus recognized from newspaper headlines. The chatter grew louder, punctuated by the gentle clinking of glasses and silverware. "Ladies and gentlemen," a voice boomed from hidden speakers, "please take your seats. The 19th Annual Palmer Foundation Charity Gala will begin in 5 minutes. Marcus felt sweat beading at his temples. Lila reached over and straightened his tie with careful fingers. "You look perfect, Daddy," she whispered. The lights dimmed slightly, and a spotlight illuminated the podium. A distinguished-looking man in a tuxedo took the stage, tapping the microphone. "Good evening, everyone. I'm Richard Palmer III, and it is my distinct pleasure to welcome you all tonight." Marcus's hands began to tremble beneath the tablecloth. Soon, they would call his name. Soon, he would have to walk up those 3 steps to the platform, face all these powerful people, and speak his truth. Lila's small hand found his again under the table. She squeezed 3 times, their secret code for "I love you." Marcus squeezed back 4 times. I love you too. And now, Palmer's voice cut through Marcus's thoughts, I'd like to invite our first speaker of the evening to the stage. Please welcome Marcus Johnson, whose story exemplifies the very spirit of resilience and determination that our foundation seeks to support. The spotlight swept across the room, finding their table. Lila gave his hand one final squeeze as they stood together, all eyes turning toward them. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering the tailor's words about dignity, remembering his daughter's faith in him, remembering who he was and why he was here. It was time to speak his truth. Marcus stood at the podium, his hands resting lightly on its polished wood. The spotlight felt warm on his face, and hundreds of expectant faces looked up at him from the darkness beyond. He glanced down at the note cards in his pocket but left them there. Lila's words echoed in his mind. Be yourself, Daddy. Good evening, he began, his voice steadier than he expected. I'm Marcus Johnson. I fix cars for a living at Palmer Auto Services. He paused, letting his eyes adjust to the bright light. But that's not why I'm here tonight. I'm here as a father. From her seat in the front row, Lila beamed up at him. Her proud smile gave him strength. 10 years ago, I became a single dad to the most amazing little girl. His voice softened with love. Every morning, I watch her tackle her homework at our kitchen table. Every night, I listen to her prayers for a better world. And every day, she teaches me something new about hope. The room had grown quiet, the usual clinks of silverware and whispered conversations fading away. Marcus could feel the weight of their attention. I served this country in the military, came home with honors, and still struggled to find work that could support us. He straightened his shoulders, speaking with quiet dignity. But I never gave up, because when you're a parent, giving up isn't an option. Your children's dreams become your dreams. Their future becomes your purpose. He gestured toward Lila, who sat up straighter in her chair. My daughter wants to be a doctor someday. She's 10 years old, and she already knows more about helping people than I ever will. But the path between her dream and reality, that path isn't equal for everyone. Marcus took a deep breath, his heart pounding but his voice clear. That's why organizations like the Palmer Foundation matter. Not just for the grants and programs, but for what they represent. A belief that every child deserves a fair chance. That talent and determination should matter more than circumstances. A few heads nodded in the audience. An elderly woman at a nearby table dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. I'm standing here tonight in a borrowed suit, Marcus continued, touching his sleeve with a small smile. But I stand tall because I know my worth isn't in what I wear. It's in the example I set for my daughter. It's in the lessons we learned together about dignity, perseverance, and hope. His eyes found Lila again, and his voice grew stronger. When I look at my little girl, I see the future. Not just her future, but the future of all the children who need someone to believe in them. Who need us, all of us in this room, to see their potential and help clear their path. The silence in the room had deepened, become expectant. Marcus could feel the power of his simple truth reaching into the hearts of these wealthy strangers. Thank you for letting me share our story tonight. And thank you for considering how you might help write the next chapter, not just for my daughter, but for all the children who deserve a chance to shine. For a moment, the ballroom remained perfectly still. Then applause began to build, starting from Lila's enthusiastic clapping and spreading across the room. Several people stood, their faces moved by his words. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as he saw genuine warmth in many of their smiles. He stepped back from the podium, his shoulders relaxing. The spotlight followed him as he made his way down the steps. Lila jumped up to hug him, wrapping her arms around his waist. That was perfect, Daddy, she whispered against his jacket. Just then, a voice cut through the fading applause. It came from a man in an expensive tuxedo, seated at one of the premier tables. Well, Richard, the man said loudly to the foundation's director, not bothering to lower his voice. You certainly found us some inspirational entertainment for the evening. Laughter rippled through several nearby tables. The sound was different from the warmth of moments before. It was sharp, exclusive, the kind of laughter that drew lines between us and them. Marcus felt his chest tighten as the cruel implications of those words sank in. He wasn't a guest here, wasn't an equal. In their eyes, he was just the evening's entertainment, a touching story to make them feel good about themselves before they returned to their privileged lives. He looked down at Lila, still holding on to him. Her face had changed. The pride in her eyes had been replaced by confusion, then understanding, then hurt. She'd heard the comment too, and worse, she understood exactly what it meant. "Daddy?" she whispered, her voice small and uncertain. Marcus stood frozen, the sting of humiliation burning in his chest as more chuckles echoed around them. The spotlight that had felt warm moments ago now felt like an accusation, exposing every thread of his second-hand suit, every mark of his outsider status. In his daughter's eyes, he saw his own pain reflected back at him, and it hurt more than any laughter ever could. The borrowed car's engine hummed softly as Marcus and Lila drove through the city's darkened streets. The elegant hotel's lights grew smaller in the rearview mirror, but the echo of laughter still rang in Marcus's ears. His hands gripped the steering wheel too tightly, his knuckles pale against his dark skin. Street lights cast moving shadows across their faces as they drove. In the passenger seat, Lila sat quietly, her party dress rustling when she shifted. She kept sneaking glances at her father, her young face pinched with worry. The silence stretched between them like a heavy blanket. "Daddy?" Lila's voice was small, barely above a whisper. "Why were they laughing?" Marcus felt his throat tighten. He stopped at a red light and looked over at his daughter. Her eyes, so full of trust and confusion, made his heart ache. How could he explain prejudice to a child who saw the world with such pure eyes? "Sometimes," he started, his voice rough, "people laugh because they don't understand, or because they're scared of what's different." The light turned green, and he eased the car forward. "But your speech was good," Lila protested, straightening in her seat. "You told them about how hard you work and about helping other kids like me. That's important stuff." Marcus nodded slowly, swallowing past the lump in his throat. "It is important, baby. Very important." Then why didn't they think it was important too? The innocent question hit him like a punch to the gut. Marcus took a deep breath, remembering the smirks on those wealthy faces, the whispered comments behind manicured hands. He thought about the board members' words, "evening's entertainment," and how quickly the room had turned from respectful attention to dismissive amusement. "Some people," he said carefully, "they think they're better than others because they have more money or because they look different. They forget that what really matters is what's in here." He took one hand off the wheel to tap his chest. Lila frowned, processing this. "That's stupid," she declared with the frank honesty of childhood. Despite his pain, Marcus felt a small smile touch his lips. "Yeah, baby, it is." They turned onto their street, lined with modest apartments and small businesses closed for the night. The difference between this neighborhood and the gleaming hotel district was stark, but Marcus had never felt more grateful to be home. "But Daddy," Lila said as they parked, "what are you going to do? They shouldn't laugh at people like that." Marcus turned off the engine and sat back in his seat. The street was quiet except for a distant siren and the hum of crickets. He turned to face his daughter fully, seeing in her face all the hope and determination he sometimes forgot to feel himself. "One day," he said softly but firmly, "they'll listen. I promise you that, Lila. They'll listen because what we have to say matters. What we want to change matters." Lila reached over and put her small hand on his arm. "I believe you, Daddy." They climbed the 3 flights of stairs to their apartment, their footsteps echoing in the stairwell. Marcus helped Lila out of her party dress and into her pajamas, tucking her into bed with extra care tonight. "Daddy?" she called as he turned to leave her room. "Yes, baby? I'm proud of you." Even if they laughed, Marcus had to take a moment before he could answer. "Thank you, baby. That means everything to me. Now, get some sleep." He closed her door quietly and walked to the kitchen table where his speech notes lay scattered. Picking up the carefully written cards, he read through his words again, honest words about hard work, about dreams for his daughter, about wanting to make a difference in their community. The memory of laughter rose up again, bitter, and sharp. Marcus crumpled the notes in his fist, the paper crinkling loudly in the quiet apartment. He walked to the trash can and dropped them in, watching them settle among the coffee grounds and empty cereal boxes. Standing there in his too-tight borrowed suit, Marcus set his jaw and made a silent vow. Things had to change. Not just for him, not just for Lila, but for everyone who'd ever been dismissed or laughed at because they didn't fit someone else's idea of what belonged. He reached up and loosened his tie, letting it hang loose around his neck. The fancy clothes couldn't hide who he really was: a father, a worker, a man who deserved respect, and he would make them see that, one way or another. The crumpled speech notes lay in the trash, but Marcus knew the real words, the ones that would make a difference, were still waiting to be spoken. He would find them, and next time, no one would laugh. The morning sun filtered through the grimy windows of Johnson's auto shop as Marcus methodically worked under the hood of a beaten-up Chevrolet. His hands moved automatically, but his mind kept drifting back to the previous night's humiliation. The sound of footsteps on concrete made him look up. "Hey Marcus, you're in early," Ray Martinez called out, wiping his hands on a red shop rag. Ray had worked alongside Marcus for the past 5 years, and they'd developed the kind of friendship that didn't need many words. Marcus straightened up, his back protesting after being bent over the engine. "Yeah, couldn't sleep much." Ray leaned against the workbench, his dark eyes studying Marcus's face. "How'd that fancy gala go?" Marcus's jaw tightened. He set down his wrench with a metallic clang that echoed through the quiet garage. "Not great." "That bad, huh?" Ray pulled up a worn shop stool and sat down. "Want to talk about it?" Marcus hesitated, then told Ray everything: the borrowed suit, the speech, and worst of all, the laughter. His voice grew hoarse as he described Lila's confused face. "Man, that's rough," Ray said, shaking his head. "But you know what? Those folks, they live in their bubble. They don't know what it's like out here in the real world." Marcus picked up a socket wrench, turning it over in his hands. "That's just it, Ray. They don't know, and they don't care to know. But Lila," he paused, swallowing hard. "She deserves better than that." "Not just Lila," Ray said, straightening up. "There are hundreds of kids in this neighborhood who deserve better. You know my nephew Miguel? Smart kid, great with computers, but his school doesn't even have a proper computer lab." Marcus nodded slowly. He'd seen it countless times. Bright kids with dim futures, not because they lacked ability, but because they lacked opportunity. "You know what I think?" Ray continued, his voice growing animated. "All these fancy charity people want to feel good about themselves, but they don't really connect with the community. What if?" He paused, gesturing with his hands. "What if we started something ourselves? A program for the kids around here?" Marcus set down the wrench, his full attention now on Ray. "What kind of program?" "Something real, something practical. Tech skills, job training, mentorship, the stuff these kids actually need. You've got that military background, right? Leadership experience?" "Yeah, but..." Marcus started to protest, but Ray cut him off. "And you're raising Lila on your own, doing a damn good job of it too. You know what these kids need because you're living it, Marcus. You're not some suit in a boardroom." The idea started to take root in Marcus's mind. He thought about all the times he'd wished for more resources for Lila, all the other parents he'd met who struggled with the same challenges. Throughout the day, between oil changes and tire rotations, Marcus and Ray continued their discussion. Ray knew people at the community center. Marcus had connections through the veterans group. By lunch break, what had started as a vague idea began to feel more concrete. That evening, after tucking Lila into bed, Marcus sat at their small kitchen table. The surface was covered with notebook papers, each filled with his neat handwriting. He'd sketched out rough plans, weekly workshops, mentorship programs, practical skills training. The numbers were daunting, but not impossible. The soft padding of feet made him look up. Lila stood in the doorway in her favorite pajamas, the ones with little stars all over them. "Can't sleep?" Marcus asked softly. Lila shook her head. "I heard you thinking," she said, making him smile. She had always been perceptive that way. I'm gonna make you some cocoa. Baby, you should be in bed, Marcus protested. But Lila was already pulling out the cocoa mix from the cabinet, standing on her tiptoes to reach. While she waited for the milk to warm in the microwave, she peered at his notes. You're working on something important, huh? Marcus looked at his daughter, this small person who somehow managed to see right through to the heart of things. He thought about the laughter at the gala, about Ray's words, about all the kids in their neighborhood who deserved a chance. But mostly, he thought about the determined set of Lila's jaw as she carefully stirred his cocoa, the same determination he felt growing in his own heart. The microwave beeped, and Lila carefully carried the steaming mug over to him, setting it down between his papers. She'd added extra marshmallows, just the way he liked it. Marcus pulled her close, kissing the top of her head, breathing in the sweet smell of her strawberry shampoo. Yeah, baby, he said. It's something important. The morning sun filtered through stained glass windows as Marcus stepped into the old brick church. His work boots echoed against worn wooden floors that had seen decades of faithful footsteps. Pastor Green's warm smile greeted him from across the sanctuary. Marcus Johnson, what brings you here on a Tuesday morning? The pastor's rich voice carried through the empty church. Marcus wiped his palms on his jeans, suddenly nervous. Pastor Green, I was hoping to talk to you about something important. Of course, come to my office. Pastor Green gestured toward a modest room off the main hall. Coffee? Yes, please. Marcus settled into a weathered chair while the pastor poured 2 cups from an ancient coffee maker. The office walls were lined with photos of community events, graduation ceremonies, and countless smiling faces. Marcus took a deep breath, wrapping his hands around the warm mug. So, what's on your mind? Pastor Green settled behind his desk, his kind eyes focused entirely on Marcus. I went to this fancy charity gala last week, Marcus began, his voice quiet but steady. It opened my eyes to something. Our kids, they need more than just hopes and prayers. They need a real chance. Pastor Green nodded slowly, encouraging Marcus to continue. I've been thinking about starting a youth program, something practical, teaching kids basic car maintenance, maybe some computer skills, things that could lead to real jobs. Marcus leaned forward. But more than that, showing them they're worth something, that they belong in those fancy rooms too. The pastor's face brightened. Now that's what I call divine inspiration, Marcus. Tell me more. For the next hour, Marcus shared his vision, his voice growing stronger with each detail. He talked about mentorship, about building confidence, about creating opportunities. When he finally paused, Pastor Green was beaming. This community needs exactly what you're describing, the pastor said. But I imagine you're wondering about space. Marcus nodded. That's my biggest hurdle right now. Can't exactly run it from my apartment. Pastor Green stood up and grabbed his keys. Follow me. I want to show you something. They descended a creaky staircase to the church basement. The pastor flicked on fluorescent lights that hummed to life, revealing a large, open room. Dust motes danced in the air, and old folding tables were stacked against one wall. A few defunct computers sat covered in sheets. It's not much, Pastor Green admitted, but with some work, this space could be transformed. The church board has been looking for ways to better serve our community. He turned to Marcus. If you're serious about this program, the basement is yours. Marcus walked the length of the room, his mind already calculating possibilities. Pastor, I don't know what to say. Say you'll use it to change lives. Pastor Green replied simply. That's all the payment we need. They spent the next hour discussing logistics, cleaning, repairs, scheduling. By the time Marcus left, he had keys to the basement and permission to start work immediately. That evening, after picking up Lila from school, Marcus drove back to the church. I've got something special to show you, baby girl. Lila's eyes widened as they entered the basement. Is this where you're going to help kids, Daddy? That's the plan. Marcus flicked on the lights. But first, we need to clean it up. Want to help? Can I be your assistant director? Lila asked, her face serious. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing off the concrete walls. Assistant director? I like the sound of that. They found brooms in a utility closet and got to work. Lila hummed while she swept, occasionally breaking into little dance moves with her broom. Her giggles bounced around the room, making the dusty space feel more alive already. Look, Daddy. Lila drew a smiley face in the dust with her finger. This place is happy we're here. Marcus paused his sweeping to watch his daughter. Her simple joy made his heart swell. This was why he was doing this. Not just for her, but for all the children who needed to know their worth. You know what? Lila said, propping her chin on her broom handle. Those fancy people at the gala would never get their hands dirty like this, but we're making something better than their fancy party. Marcus stopped sweeping entirely, struck by the wisdom in her words. You're right about that, baby girl. Sometimes the best things start from the bottom up. They worked until their arms were tired, creating neat piles of dust and debris. The room was far from ready, but it was a start. When they finally set their brooms aside, both were covered in dust but grinning. How about we get some ice cream to celebrate our first day of work? Marcus suggested, watching Lila try to brush dust off her clothes. Yes! She jumped up and down, sending more dust flying. Assistant directors definitely need ice cream. As they gathered their things to leave, Lila took one last look around the basement. Daddy? Yeah, baby? I can see it already, how good it's going to be. Can you? Marcus looked around the dim basement, seeing past the dust and darkness to what could be. Chairs filled with eager faces, computers humming with possibility, young lives being changed. Yeah, baby girl, I sure can. They switched off the lights and climbed the stairs, tired but energized by possibility. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, but tonight, hope filled their hearts as fully as dust covered their clothes. The church basement hummed with life as Marcus arranged the mismatched chairs into a circle. Afternoon light filtered through the high-set windows, casting long shadows across the concrete floor. He checked his watch, 3:15 p.m. The kids would arrive any minute after school let out. His hands trembled slightly as he laid out the donated notebooks and pencils on a folding table. What if no one showed up? The doubt crept in, but he pushed it away, remembering Lila's excitement when she'd helped him put up flyers around the neighborhood last weekend. The creak of the basement door made him look up. Two boys, maybe 12 or 13, stood at the top of the stairs, peering down uncertainly. Come on in, Marcus called out, keeping his voice gentle. I'm Mr. Johnson. The taller boy nudged his friend forward. My mom said this is where we can get help with homework? That's right. Marcus gestured to the chairs. I'm here to help. What's giving you trouble? Math, both boys said simultaneously, then broke into nervous laughter. As they settled in, the door opened again. This time, a girl about Lila's age entered, followed by 3 more kids. Marcus's heart lifted 6 students on the first day. Welcome, everyone, he said, watching them choose their seats. Let's start by introducing ourselves. The afternoon unfolded better than he'd hoped. Marcus moved between the kids, helping with fraction problems and vocabulary worksheets. His years of checking Lila's homework had prepared him well. When mine started wandering, he called for a break, pulling out the basketball he'd brought. Who wants to learn some drills? He asked. The energy in the room instantly shifted from tired to electric. In the following days, more children appeared. Word spread through the neighborhood that Mr. Johnson's program wasn't just about homework, it was fun. By Friday, 15 kids crowded the basement, and Marcus had to arrange more chairs. Daddy, Lila said one evening as she helped him clean up. Jasmine from my class wants to come too. Her big brother told her about the cool games you teach. Marcus paused in stacking chairs. The more the merrier, baby girl. But as numbers grew, so did the challenges. Some kids needed more than just homework help. They needed proper school supplies, snacks, and sometimes just someone to talk to. Marcus started taking extra shifts at the auto shop to buy materials, often working until his hands ached. One Wednesday afternoon, while the kids were engaged in a reading circle, Pastor Green came down the stairs. He watched silently for a few minutes, nodding with approval. You've built something special here, Marcus, he said quietly. Marcus looked around the room. Tommy, who'd barely spoken that first day, was now helping a younger student sound out words. Sarah, who'd claimed to hate math, was proudly showing off her latest test score. In just a week, he could see changes. They just needed a chance, Marcus replied, his voice thick with emotion. Speaking of chances, Pastor Green pulled an envelope from his pocket. This came to the church office for you. Marcus recognized the foundation's logo immediately. His hands shook as he opened it, remembering the sting of laughter from the gala. The letter inside was printed on heavy paper. Dear Mr. Johnson, the Metropolitan Community Foundation Board invites you to present your youth development program at our upcoming quarterly meeting. The board is currently reviewing proposals for our annual grant funding. The words blurred as his heart pounded. This was it, a real chance at funding, at expanding the program, at proving those laughing voices wrong. But more importantly, it was a chance to secure a future for these kids who were already becoming like family. Everything okay? Pastor Green asked, noting Marcus's expression. Marcus handed him the letter, unable to speak for a moment. The pastor's eyes widened as he read. This is significant, Marcus. The foundation's grants can be substantial. It's another gala, Marcus said softly, memories of that humiliating night threatening to overwhelm him. From across the room, Lila looked up from where she was helping a younger girl with spelling. She caught his eye and smiled, that same encouraging smile she'd given him when he'd practiced his first gala speech in their apartment mirror. But this time was different. This time, he wasn't going in alone with just dreams. He had proof, living, breathing proof right here in this basement. These kids, their progress, their trust in him that was worth facing any room of wealthy donors. Marcus took a deep breath and folded the letter carefully. The foundation board would see exactly what he'd built, not what they expected to see. They'd hear about Tommy's reading progress, about Sarah's math breakthrough, about the community that was growing in this humble church basement. He turned to Pastor Green, his voice steady now. I'll need to prepare a proper presentation. The pastor squeezed his shoulder. You've already done the hard part, Marcus. You've created something real. Now you just have to show them. Around them, the basement continued to buzz with activity, children reading, laughing, learning. Each voice, each smile, was a testament to what could grow from a simple act of courage. Marcus tucked the letter into his pocket, his heart racing not with fear this time, but with possibility. It was time to show the foundation board what real change looked like. Not in fancy words or borrowed suits, but in the hope shining in these children's eyes. Marcus stood in their small living room, his reflection barely visible in the darkened TV screen. The coffee table had been pushed aside to create a makeshift presentation space. Outside, the setting sun painted their apartment in warm oranges and purples, creating long shadows across the worn carpet. Good evening, distinguished members of the board, Marcus began, his voice steady but his hands fidgeting with the note cards. My name is Marcus Johnson. Daddy, Lila interrupted from her spot on their second-hand couch. You're doing the fancy voice again. She sat cross-legged, wearing her favorite purple pajamas, her math homework forgotten beside her. Marcus's shoulders slumped. You're right, baby girl. He took a deep breath and started over, this time speaking naturally. I'm Marcus Johnson, and I want to tell you about something important happening in our community. Lila nodded encouragingly, her eyes bright. That's better. That's my daddy talking. Marcus walked back and forth, gesturing as he spoke about the youth program. He described the kids who came to the church basement, their eager faces when they solved a tough homework problem, their laughter during game time. His voice grew stronger with each word. Last week, little Tommy finally understood fractions using those measuring cups we brought in, Marcus said, smiling at the memory. And Maria? She taught the younger kids how to build paper airplanes that actually flew. Tell them about James, Lila chimed in, bouncing in her seat. About how he was so shy at first. Marcus nodded, adding that story to his mental notes. You're good at this, sweetheart. I know. She grinned. Because this time, they'll hear you, Daddy. You're not trying to be someone else. You're just being you. Her words warmed his heart, chasing away some of the nervousness that had been building all week. Marcus continued practicing while Lila offered suggestions, sometimes stern, sometimes giggling. As the evening wore on, their neighbor, Mrs. Rodriguez, brought over a plate of fresh empanadas. "For brain food," she said with a wink, having heard about the upcoming presentation. She stayed to listen, offering her own gentle feedback. The next morning, Marcus adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror. It wasn't the borrowed suit from the gala. This time he wore his own best clothes, cleaned and pressed. Simple, but dignified, just like the old tailor had said. Lila appeared in the doorway, already dressed for school, holding up his lucky pen. "Don't forget this," she said solemnly. "I put a special blessing on it." "Oh yeah?" Marcus smiled, taking the pen. "What kind of blessing?" "A daddy being brave blessing," she replied, hugging him tight. "The strongest kind there is." At the Foundation's office building downtown, Marcus sat in the waiting area, reviewing his notes one last time. Around him, board members and other attendees filed into the conference room. He recognized some faces from the gala, including the man who had made that cutting remark. But today, Marcus refused to let old hurts shake his confidence. When his name was called, Marcus walked to the front of the room with measured steps. The projector hummed to life behind him, showing photos of the kids in the program. He looked out at the sea of expectant faces and took a deep breath. "My name is Marcus Johnson," he began, his voice clear and strong. "I'm an auto mechanic, a veteran, and a single father. But more importantly, I'm someone who believes in our community's children." As he spoke, Marcus shared stories of real kids with real dreams. He talked about the church basement that became a sanctuary of learning and hope. His hands moved expressively, his passion evident in every word. "We started with just 5 kids," he explained. "Now we have 25. We need more space, more supplies, more volunteers. But what these children have already achieved with so little shows what's possible with your support." The room stayed silent, but it wasn't the uncomfortable silence from the gala. This was different. People were leaning forward, truly listening. Even the skeptical board member who had mocked him before was taking notes. Marcus showed slides of the kids working together, helping each other with homework, playing games that taught leadership skills. "Every child deserves to believe in their potential," he said. "Every child deserves to be heard." As he concluded his presentation, Marcus thought of Lila's words. "This time, they'll hear you." He looked directly at the board members. "I'm not here to entertain you. I'm here because these kids matter, their futures matter, and together, we can make a real difference in their lives." The silence held for a moment after his final words. Then, in the back of the room, someone started clapping. The applause spread quickly, growing louder as people rose to their feet. Board members nodded approvingly, some wiping tears from their eyes. Marcus stood tall at the podium, his heart full. This wasn't just applause, it was recognition, respect. The very things he had wanted his daughter to see that night at the gala. Now, even the skeptics were standing, their faces showing genuine admiration. The board chairman approached him first, hand extended. "Mr. Johnson," she said warmly, "that was quite something. We'd like to schedule a follow-up meeting to discuss funding options." Others gathered around, asking questions about the program, offering suggestions and support. Marcus answered them all with quiet confidence, remembering Lila's proud face from their practice sessions. He had done it. He had made himself heard, not by changing who he was, but by embracing it. The standing ovation continued, filling the room with the sound of possibility and change. Marcus stood in its midst, feeling the weight of doubt and past humiliation falling away. This moment wasn't just about him. It was about every child in that church basement, about Lila, about proving that genuine passion and truth could bridge any gap. In his pocket, his lucky pen pressed against his heart, carrying Lila's special blessing. As the applause finally began to fade, Marcus knew with certainty that this was just the beginning of something much bigger than himself. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of the auto shop, As Marcus wiped grease from his hands, his phone buzzed in his pocket, an email from the foundation. His heart quickened as he stepped outside to read it in private, leaning against the brick wall. The words on the screen made his stomach sink. Dear Mr. Johnson, while we appreciate your presentation and commend your initiative, due to necessary budget adjustments, we regret to inform you that funding for your proposed youth program has been postponed indefinitely. Marcus read the email 3 times, each time feeling the weight of rejection press harder against his chest. The carefully worded dismissal felt like a slap, polite on the surface but cruel underneath. They hadn't even called him for a meeting or given him a chance to respond. Back inside the shop, his wrench slipped twice while working on a transmission. His boss, noticing his distraction, asked if everything was okay. Marcus just nodded, not trusting his voice to remain steady. During his lunch break, he called Pastor Williams at the church. They're not going to fund us, he said, his voice hollow. All that talk about community investment, it was just talk. Marcus, maybe we can find another way, the pastor suggested gently. I already work double shifts, Marcus replied. I barely see Lila as it is. How am I supposed to keep the program running without resources? That evening, Marcus walked through the church basement, where their small program operated. Children's artwork decorated the walls, bright crayon drawings of dreams and hopes. A handmade banner proclaimed Mr. Johnson's After-School Club in wobbly letters. He touched one of the drawings, a stick figure wearing what looked like a cape. Below it, in a child's messy handwriting, Mr. Johnson is my hero. His vision blurred. The sound of children laughing drifted down from upstairs, where the church's regular youth group was meeting. The contrast between their joy and his despair felt like a physical ache. Marcus slumped into one of the small plastic chairs they'd scrounged from donation drives. The chair creaked under his weight. Everything here was second-hand, makeshift, held together by hope and determination, just like him. The foundation's email kept replaying in his mind, postponed indefinitely. Such a gentle way of saying no. No to the computers they desperately needed. No to proper learning materials. No to hiring qualified tutors. No to everything he'd dreamed of providing. He thought about the standing ovation at his presentation. The smiles, the handshakes, the promises, all fake. They'd clapped for him like he was entertainment, just like at the gala. Then they'd dismissed him with a form letter. The basement's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows. Marcus reached up and clicked them off, preferring the darkness. In the dim light filtering through the small windows, he could barely make out the shapes of the donated furniture and supplies they'd gathered. His phone lit up, a text from Lila. When are you coming home, Daddy? Made mac and cheese. The simple message twisted something inside him. He'd promised her things would be different. Promised her that people would listen this time. Instead, he'd failed again. The children's laughter continued upstairs, muffled now, seeming to come from very far away. Marcus buried his face in his hands, his shoulders slumping. The words came out as barely a whisper, bitter with defeat. Maybe they were right about me. The morning light crept through the threadbare curtains of the Johnson apartment, but Marcus barely noticed. He sat at the kitchen table, staring into a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The rejection letter from the foundation lay crumpled in the trash, but its words still echoed in his mind. Budget adjustments, postponed indefinitely, better timing in the future. 4 days had passed since receiving the news. 4 days of going through the motions at work, forcing smiles for customers, and trying to hide his pain from Lila. The basement program continued, but each session felt hollow now, knowing it might not last another month without funding. Marcus pushed away his untouched toast, his appetite non-existent. The kitchen clock ticked loudly in the silence. 7:15 a.m. Usually, he'd be hurrying Lila along for school, but today he couldn't summon the energy to move. Daddy? Lila's voice came from the hallway. I'm ready for school early today. She appeared in her navy uniform, her backpack already on. Her eyes, so much like her mother's, studied him with worry. Marcus tried to smile, but it felt more like a grimace. "That's great, baby. Just give me a minute to get my keys." Lila didn't move. Instead, she set her backpack down and pulled out the chair across from him. "You didn't eat dinner last night," she said matter-of-factly. "Or the night before." Marcus straightened, trying to appear more alert. "I ate at work." "No, you didn't." Lila's voice was gentle but firm. "Miss Rosa from the diner called. She said you haven't been picking up your usual lunch orders." The concern in his daughter's eyes made Marcus's chest ache. When had his 10-year-old become so observant, so protective? "I'm just not very hungry lately, that's all." Lila reached across the table and pushed his cold toast closer to him. "You always tell me breakfast is important, that we need fuel for our brains." Marcus picked up the toast mechanically and took a small bite, tasting nothing. "You're right. I'm sorry I'm not setting a good example." "Is it because of the foundation?" Lila asked quietly. "Because they said no?" Marcus set the toast down, his hands trembling slightly. "How did you—" "I heard you on the phone with Pastor Mike." Lila's fingers traced patterns on the worn tablecloth. "You said something about them breaking their promise." The weight of his failure pressed down on Marcus's shoulders. He'd tried so hard to shield Lila from this disappointment, but children always knew more than adults gave them credit for. "Sometimes," he began carefully, "even when you do everything right, things don't work out the way you hoped." "Like when they laughed at the gala?" Lila's question was barely a whisper. Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "But after that night, you told me something." Lila stood up and moved around the table to stand beside him. "You said we don't let other people decide our worth." "I did say that, didn't I? And when I wanted to quit ballet because Jenny said I wasn't good enough, what did you tell me?" Marcus remembered that day clearly. Lila in tears after a particularly rough practice, ready to give up her dream. "I told you not to give up." "Daddy." Lila's small hand found his cheek, turning his face toward her. Her eyes were fierce with conviction. "You told me not to give up. Why are you giving up now?" The simple truth in her words hit Marcus like a physical force. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not just his little girl but a mirror reflecting his own teachings back at him. Lila continued, her voice growing stronger. "You always say we're Johnson strong. That means something, right? Or was that just words?" Marcus pulled Lila into his arms, holding her tight as tears threatened to fall. She was right. Every lesson he'd taught her about perseverance, about dignity, about standing up after falling down, they weren't just pretty words to make her feel better. They were truths he believed in his core, truths he'd somehow forgotten in his despair. "No, baby," he whispered into her hair. "Those weren't just words, and you're right. I've been teaching you one thing and doing another." Lila hugged him back fiercely. "Then you can't give up. Not just for me, but for all the kids in the basement who look up to you. For yourself, too." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling something shift inside him. The heaviness of the past few days began to lift, replaced by a familiar determination. His daughter's wisdom had cut through the fog of his depression like a beam of sunlight. He held her tighter, drawing strength from her unwavering faith in him. This wasn't just about proving the foundation wrong anymore. It was about showing Lila, showing all the children in his program, that dignity and perseverance weren't just words. They were actions, choices made every day, especially when things got hard. "Thank you, baby girl," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion. "Sometimes the student becomes the teacher, huh?" Lila pulled back and gave him a serious look. "Does this mean you'll eat breakfast now?" Marcus laughed, his first real laugh in days, and reached for the toast. "Yes, ma'am. Can't fight back on an empty stomach, can I?" Marcus's fingers trembled as he picked up his old flip phone. The kitchen table was covered with scraps of paper names and numbers of people he'd met over the years. Some were from his military days, others from church, and a few kind faces he remembered from the gala. His coffee had gone cold, untouched. "Who are you calling first, Daddy?" Lila asked from across the table, her math homework spread out before her. "Pastor Green," Marcus replied, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "He's always been good to us." The phone rang 3 times before Pastor Green's warm voice answered. "Marcus, my brother, I was just thinking about you." Marcus cleared his throat. "Pastor, I need your help. The foundation, they've turned their backs on the kids." "Tell me everything," Pastor Green said, and Marcus did. For the next hour, Marcus explained how the foundation had praised his program publicly but quietly killed it with budget cuts. As he spoke, Pastor Green's occasional "mms" grew into determined declarations. "This isn't right," Pastor Green said firmly. "Give me an hour. I'm calling every minister in my circle." By noon, Marcus's kitchen had become a makeshift command center. Pastor Green arrived with a notebook full of contacts. 3 other pastors from neighboring churches followed, cramming around the small table. Lila served them water in mismatched cups, beaming with pride as she watched her father speak with growing confidence. "We've got your back, brother," said Reverend Williams, one of Pastor Green's colleagues. "My congregation has been looking for a cause to rally behind. This is it." Marcus worked his way through his contact list. He called Jerry, a fellow veteran who now worked at City Hall. "Those suit and tie types think they can just sweep us under the rug?" Jerry had growled. "Not on my watch. I know some reporters who'd love this story." By mid-afternoon, Marcus's small living room was filling up. Sarah Chen, a teacher he'd met at the gala who'd seemed genuinely moved by his speech, arrived with a stack of papers. "I've drafted a letter to the board," she said, "and I've got signatures from 15 other educators already." The energy in the room was electric. People were making calls, drafting plans, sharing contacts. Marcus watched in amazement as his small dream grew into something bigger than himself. "Look at this, Daddy," Lila whispered, tugging at his sleeve. She pointed to all the people crowded into their apartment, working together. "They're not laughing now." Marcus squeezed her shoulder, fighting back tears. Pastor Green stood up, commanding attention. "We need to make this public," he announced. "The foundation wants to handle this quietly. Let's bring it into the light." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "What kind of public event?" "A community showcase," Sarah suggested. "We invite the media, local officials, and foundation board members. Show them exactly what they're trying to shut down." "We can host it at my church," Pastor Green offered. "It's bigger than the basement you've been using. We'll invite the kids from your program to demonstrate what they've learned." The planning continued into the evening. Marcus watched as his small apartment buzzed with activity. People he barely knew were fighting for his cause, believing in his vision. The same program that the foundation had dismissed was bringing together people from all walks of life. "We'll need to prepare you to speak," Pastor Green said gently, pulling Marcus aside. "This time, you're not just telling your story. You're speaking for all these kids, all these families who need this program." Marcus nodded, feeling both nervous and strengthened. He looked around the room at the veterans who understood his struggle, the teachers who saw the potential in every child, the religious leaders who believed in justice, and the gala attendees who'd chosen to stand with him rather than their wealthy peers. "When?" Marcus asked. 2 weeks, Pastor Green replied. "Enough time to organize properly, but not so long that they can sweep this under the rug." As the evening wound down and people began to leave, each person stopped to shake Marcus's hand or give him a hug. They left him with their numbers, their promises, and their support. Finally, only Pastor Green remained. He put a firm hand on Marcus's shoulder. "You're not alone in this fight anymore, brother." After Pastor Green left, Marcus sat on the couch, emotionally drained but filled with new purpose. Lila curled up next to him, laying her head on his shoulder. "Are you scared, Daddy?" she asked softly. Marcus considered the question carefully. "Yes," he admitted, "but sometimes being scared means you're doing something important." "All those people came because they believe in you," Lila said, "just like I do." Marcus pulled her close, grateful for his daughter's simple wisdom. Tomorrow, they would start preparing for the public event. It would be challenging, possibly even confrontational. But looking around his apartment, seeing the papers, plans, and evidence of support scattered everywhere, Marcus knew he had found something precious, a community willing to stand beside him. The fear was still there, But it was different now. It wasn't the paralyzing fear he'd felt at the gala, or the crushing despair of the Foundation's rejection. This was the nervous energy of possibility, of knowing that something significant was about to happen. Marcus reached for his phone one last time that night. He had one more call to make to the first kid who joined his program in that church basement. That boy deserved to know that the fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. Marcus stood in their small living room, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the faded curtains. The walls, usually bare except for Lila's school artwork, were now covered with her colorful drawings of what she imagined their youth center could be. Each picture showed smiling stick figures, rainbow-colored buildings, and hearts everywhere. "Read it again, Daddy," Lila said, sitting cross-legged on their worn couch, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. From the beginning. Marcus cleared his throat, adjusting his reading glasses. The paper in his hands was wrinkled from countless revisions. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I'm not here to entertain you today. I'm here because our children deserve better." "Strong start," Lila bounced on the cushions. "Keep going. When I came home from serving our country, I thought doors would open. Instead, I found them closed. But I kept pushing, kept working, because my daughter taught me that giving up isn't an option." Lila jumped up, grabbing another crayon drawing from her backpack. "Wait, we need more decorations." She carefully taped it to the wall beside the others. This one showed a big building with "Kids Welcome" written in wobbly letters across the top. Marcus continued reading, his voice growing stronger. "Our youth program isn't just about homework help or keeping kids off the streets. It's about showing them they matter, that their dreams count, that they deserve the same chances as anyone else's children." "That's where you point to the pictures of the kids," Lila directed, taking her role as speech coach very seriously. She grabbed a stack of photographs from the coffee table, snapshots of the children who'd been coming to their basement program. Marcus nodded, practicing the gesture. "These are real children, real dreams, real futures at stake. When you cut our funding without explanation, you weren't just closing a program, you were closing doors of opportunity." Lila frowned, concentrating hard. "Maybe say that part slower, Daddy. Make them really think about it." He smiled at her insight. "You're right, baby. That part needs to sink in." She hopped up again, this time retrieving her latest masterpiece from behind the TV. "Look, I drew you at the podium." The crayon version of Marcus stood tall, wearing what appeared to be a superhero cape. "A cape?" he chuckled. "Because you're brave," she said matter-of-factly, taping it front and center on the wall. Like a superhero. Marcus had to swallow hard before continuing. "We're not asking for charity. We're asking for partnership, for recognition that every child deserves a chance to shine, regardless of their zip code or the color of their skin." "The end needs to be bigger," Lila declared, standing up and spreading her arms wide. "Like boom." Marcus couldn't help laughing. "Bigger how?" "Like." She scrunched up her face in thought. "Like when you tell me stories before bed. The ending always makes me feel good inside." Marcus looked down at his speech, then back at his daughter. In that moment, he saw what she meant. The words were strong, but they needed heart. They needed hope. They spent the next hour revising, Lila adding more drawings to their gallery wall between suggestions. She drew stars and flowers around the edges of each picture, making their living room look like a rainbow had exploded inside it. As evening settled in, Marcus watched Lila yawn while coloring yet another picture. "Time for bed, baby girl. Just one more drawing," she pleaded, but her eyes were already heavy. He scooped her up, careful not to disturb her latest artwork. "Tomorrow's a big day. We both need our rest." In her room, Lila insisted on sleeping in her favorite purple pajamas. Her lucky ones, she called them. Marcus tucked her in, making sure her stuffed rabbit was properly situated. "Daddy?" Her voice was soft, already dreamy with approaching sleep. "Yes, baby? Don't let them laugh this time." She reached for his hand in the dim light. "Make them listen." Marcus squeezed her small fingers gently. "I promise." "Pinky promise?" She held up her tiny pinky finger. "Pinky promise." He linked his finger with hers, sealing the vow. Lila's eyes fluttered closed, but she managed one last whisper. "You're going to be amazing." Marcus kissed her forehead and quietly left her room. In the hallway, he paused, looking back at his sleeping daughter. Tomorrow would change everything. For her, for the kids in their program, for their whole community. He had to make them listen. He'd promised. The old wooden steps creaked under Marcus's feet as he descended into the church basement. His heart thumped against his ribs, and his starched collar felt too tight. The familiar musty scent of aged books and wooden pews mixed with the nervous energy of dozens of bodies packed into the space. Every folding chair was filled. People lined the walls, shoulder to shoulder. Marcus recognized faces from the neighborhood, parents whose children attended his program, veterans who'd helped clean up the basement, shop owners who'd donated supplies. Even Mrs. Chen from the corner store had closed early to be here. In the back, several foundation board members sat stiffly, their expensive suits out of place among the working-class crowd. They whispered among themselves, casting wary glances around the room. Marcus spotted the man who had mocked him at the gala, now looking uncomfortable in this unfamiliar setting. Lila sat in the front row, wearing her best Sunday dress. Her small hands clutched a stack of her drawings. She'd insisted on displaying them on a board near the makeshift podium, bright, hopeful visions of what their youth center could become. Pastor Williams stepped up to the microphone. "Brothers and sisters," his deep voice filled the room, "we're here tonight because one man had the courage to dream bigger than himself. Marcus Johnson saw our children needed help, and instead of waiting for someone else to step up, he did it himself." Marcus's hands trembled as he gripped his note cards. He'd practiced this speech 100 times, but now the words seemed to blur before his eyes. He thought of all the nights spent in this basement, teaching kids math problems, breaking up squabbles, celebrating small victories. "I'd like to call Marcus Johnson to speak now," Pastor Williams said, stepping aside. The room fell silent. Marcus stood, his legs feeling like lead. As he passed Lila, she reached out and squeezed his hand. "Remember, Daddy," she whispered. "Make them listen." At the podium, Marcus looked out at the sea of faces. Some held phones, recording. 2 local reporters sat ready with their notepads. The weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders. He cleared his throat. "I'm not good at fancy speeches," he began, his voice quiet but steady. "I'm just a mechanic who wants better for our kids, but sometimes the simplest truths need saying." Marcus set his note cards aside. "When I stood at that gala months ago, some of you laughed at me. You saw a black man in a borrowed suit trying to sound important." His eyes found the board member who had mocked him. "You made me feel small. But you know what? That laughter didn't just hurt me. It hurt every child who looks like my daughter. Every parent working double shifts to make ends meet. Every person who's ever been told they don't belong at the table." The room was absolutely still. Even the usual creaks of the old building seemed hushed. "This youth program isn't about me," Marcus continued, his voice growing stronger. "It's about Tommy, who raised his math grade from a D to a B because someone finally had time to help him understand fractions. It's about Maria, who stopped getting into fights because she found out she's amazing at chess. It's about kids having a safe place to go after school while their parents are still at work." He gestured to Leela's drawings on the wall. "My daughter drew these pictures of what she thinks our youth center could be. Look at them. There are no separate tables for rich kids and poor kids. No walls between black children and white children. In her eyes, it's just a place where everyone belongs." Marcus gripped the sides of the podium. "You talk about budget adjustments and postponed funding. I talk about real children with real needs. You see a line item on a spreadsheet. I see futures being shaped or destroyed by the decisions made in boardrooms I'm not allowed to enter." His voice cracked slightly, but he pressed on. "When you laughed at me that night, you thought you were putting me in my place. But you showed me exactly where I needed to be, right here, fighting for these kids, demanding the dignity they deserve." Some people in the audience were nodding now. Others wiped at their eyes. "I'm not asking for charity," Marcus said firmly. "I'm asking for partnership. I'm asking you to see these children the way I see them, not as statistics or photo opportunities, but as future leaders, doctors, teachers, maybe even foundation board members. A knowing murmur rippled through the crowd. The question isn't whether we can afford to fund this program. The question is, how can we afford not to? Every child we help now is one less adult struggling later. Every kid who finds their passion here is one more success story waiting to happen. Marcus looked directly at the board members. "You have the power to make these drawings come true," he said, pointing to Lila's artwork. "You can choose to be part of the problem or part of the solution. But either way, we're not going anywhere. These kids deserve better, and we'll keep fighting until they get it." He straightened his shoulders. "You might have laughed at me once, but I'm not here for your amusement. I'm here for justice. I'm here for hope. I'm here because every child deserves to dream big without being told to dream smaller." Marcus's final words rang out clear and strong. "You can fund this program or not, but you can't stop what we've started. These kids know their worth now. They know they deserve better, and they know we'll stand up for them, no matter what." The silence held for one breathless moment. Then, like a wave breaking, the applause began. It started in the back and rolled forward, growing louder and louder until it filled every corner of the basement. People stood, clapping and cheering. Some were crying openly now. The reporters' pens flew across their notebooks. Phones recorded everything. Even some of the board members had risen to their feet, caught up in the moment's raw energy. Through it all, Marcus kept his eyes on Lila. She beamed at him, clapping as hard as her small hands could manage, pride shining in her eyes. In that moment, he knew, whatever happened next, he had already won the most important victory. He had shown his daughter what it meant to stand up, speak out, and fight for what was right. The applause continued, echoing off the basement walls, a thunderous affirmation of truth spoken to power. Marcus sat on the hard wooden bench outside the foundation's boardroom, his worn dress shoes tapping an anxious rhythm on the polished marble floor. Lila nestled against his side, her small hand wrapped tightly in his. The morning sun streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the hallway's expensive carpeting. "How much longer, Daddy?" Lila whispered, smoothing her favorite yellow dress, the one she insisted on wearing for good luck. "Soon, baby." Marcus checked his watch for the 100th time. The board had been meeting for over 2 hours. Outside the building's glass doors, he could see the crowd that had gathered. Church members held signs supporting the youth program. Local news vans lined the curb, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky. The story had exploded after his speech in the church basement, with social media sharing videos of children talking about what the program meant to them. Marcus's phone buzzed again. Another message from Pastor Williams. "Still praying. Stay strong." The weight of the moment pressed down on his shoulders. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about every child who needed a safe place after school, every parent working late shifts who worried about their kids, every dream that deserved a chance to grow. Lila pulled out her sketchbook, the one she carried everywhere, and began drawing. Marcus peeked over her shoulder, smiling at the careful lines forming what looked like their basement classroom, but bigger, brighter. "That's beautiful, sweetheart," he said softly. "It's the new youth center," she explained, adding stick figures with big smiles. "See? This is you teaching, and these are all the kids, and look, I made the windows really big so lots of light can come in." Marcus swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Even if things didn't work out today, he knew he'd already won something precious, his daughter's pride. The sound of chairs scraping across floor inside the boardroom made them both look up. Muffled voices grew louder, and Marcus's heart raced. He stood, straightening his tie, the one Lila had picked out this morning, declaring it his victory tie. "Remember what you told me, Daddy?" Lila stood beside him, clutching her sketchbook. "About not giving up?" Marcus nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. "Well, I believe in you," she said firmly, "and so does everybody else." Heavy footsteps approached the door. Marcus took a deep breath, squeezing Lila's hand. The past weeks flashed through his mind. The humiliation at the gala, the late nights planning in their kitchen, the children's faces lighting up during lessons, the community rising to support them, and through it all, Lila's unwavering faith in him. The boardroom door opened. Board members filed out, their expressions unreadable. Marcus recognized some faces from the gala, including the man who had laughed at him. Today, that man wouldn't meet his eyes. Finally, Mrs. Richardson, the foundation's executive director, emerged. Her gray suit matched her steel-colored hair, but her usual stern expression had softened somewhat. She carried a thick folder. The hallway fell silent. Even Lila held her breath. Mrs. Richardson cleared her throat. "Mr. Johnson," she began, her voice echoing slightly in the quiet space. "The board has reviewed your proposal extensively. We've examined the community impact, the financial projections, and the overwhelming public support for your initiative." She paused, opening the folder. Marcus felt Lila's hand tighten around his. The foundation prides itself on making decisions based on merit and community benefit, Mrs. Richardson continued. While the process of arriving at this decision has been unconventional, we cannot ignore the clear evidence before us. Another pause. Marcus's heart pounded so hard he wondered if everyone could hear it. Therefore, I am pleased to announce that the Foundation has voted to fully fund the Johnson Youth Program, effective immediately. Furthermore, we would like to appoint you, Mr. Johnson, as the program's full-time director with a salary and benefits package commensurate with the position. The words took a moment to sink in. When they did, Marcus felt his knees go weak. Tears spilled down his cheeks as he pulled Lila into a tight embrace, lifting her off her feet. She squealed with delight, wrapping her arms around his neck. "We did it, Daddy," she cried. "We really did it." Marcus couldn't speak. He just held his daughter, his tears falling into her hair as years of struggle, doubt, and hope crashed over him like a wave. Through his blurred vision, he could see people gathering at the glass doors, faces pressed against the windows. Pastor Williams was there, beaming. Mrs. Chen was wiping her eyes. Someone started clapping, and soon the sound filled the hallway, spilling out onto the street. But Marcus barely heard it. In that moment, his whole world was the feel of his daughter in his arms, and the knowledge that sometimes, just sometimes, dignity and determination could win against all odds. "I love you, baby girl," he whispered into Lila's ear. "Thank you for believing in your daddy." "I'll always believe in you," she whispered back. "Always." The morning sun painted golden stripes across the freshly painted walls of the youth center. Marcus stood at the entrance, adjusting his tie as volunteers hustled around him, hanging the last of the colorful welcome banners. The old church basement had been transformed into something magical, something that felt like hope made real. "Everything has to be perfect," Marcus muttered, straightening a slightly crooked sign. "It already is perfect, Daddy," Lila said, appearing beside him in her new dress, the blue one they'd bought specially for today's opening. Her hair was done up in neat braids, tied with matching ribbons. The parking lot was filling up quickly. Cars of all kinds pulled in, some shiny and new from the Foundation board members, others well-worn but proudly polished from the neighborhood families. Children piled out, their excited chatter filling the air like music. Pastor Wilson arrived early, carrying a large box of donated books. "Marcus, my brother," he called out, his warm smile lighting up his face. "Look at what you've built." Marcus felt his chest tighten with emotion as he looked around. Where there had once been a dusty basement, there now stood a proper youth center with fresh paint, new computers, and walls lined with books. The art room sparkled with supplies, and the homework area was set up with clean desks and comfortable chairs. The crowd grew larger as the morning went on. Community members who'd supported Marcus from the start mingled with Foundation board members who'd eventually come around. Even the tough-looking teenagers from the neighborhood tried to hide their excitement, though their eyes lit up at the sight of the game room. Mrs. Thompson from the Foundation board approached Marcus, extending her hand. "I must admit, Mr. Johnson, I was wrong about you." Her voice carried genuine respect now, not the condescension from that first gala. What you've accomplished here, it's remarkable. Before Marcus could respond, music started playing from the speakers they'd set up. The local jazz band, made up of retired veterans, had begun their first number. The melody wrapped around the crowd like a warm embrace, setting the perfect mood for celebration. 10 minutes until the ribbon cutting, called out one of the organizers. Lila tugged at Marcus's sleeve. Can I help hold the scissors, Daddy? Of course you can, baby. He smiled down at her, remembering how she'd stuck by him through every step of this journey. You're as much a part of this as anyone. The crowd began gathering around the entrance. Marcus spotted familiar faces everywhere. The auto shop co-workers who'd donated their time to help renovate, the thrift shop tailor who'd altered his suit for that first gala, the veteran friends who'd rallied support when things looked darkest. Mayor Wilson stepped up to the microphone they'd set up. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice carrying across the hushed crowd. We're here today because one man refused to let his dream die, because one father wanted to build something better for all our children. As the mayor spoke, Marcus felt Lila's small hand slip into his. He squeezed it gently, drawing strength from her presence just as he had so many times before. And now, the mayor concluded, I invite Marcus Johnson and his daughter Lila to cut the ribbon and officially open the New Hope Youth Center. The crowd erupted in applause as Marcus and Lila stepped forward. Someone handed them the large, ceremonial scissors. Marcus positioned them on the bright red ribbon, helping Lila wrap her smaller hands around the handles next to his. Ready? He whispered to her. She nodded, her face glowing with pride. Together, they squeezed the handles. The ribbon parted with a satisfying snip, and cheers erupted from the crowd. Camera flashes popped like stars, capturing the moment for tomorrow's papers. The band struck up a livelier tune as people began moving toward the entrance. Children bounced excitedly, barely containing themselves as they waited to explore their new space. Parents wiped away proud tears, and even some of the foundation board members looked genuinely moved. Marcus stood for a moment, taking it all in. The building seemed to pulse with possibility, each room ready to nurture dreams, build confidence, and create opportunities. This wasn't just a youth center, it was a promise kept, a stand for dignity, a beacon of hope. Lila pulled gently on his hand, ready to go inside. As they stepped through the doorway together, she looked up at him with those wise eyes that had seen him through his darkest moments. Daddy, she whispered, her voice full of pride and love. They don't laugh at you anymore. They listen. Marcus smiled, bending down to kiss her forehead as children streamed past them into the bright, hopeful future. The sound of their laughter echoed through the halls like music, the sweetest kind of victory he could have imagined. What would you do if you were in their place? Comment your answer below, and let's see how you'd rewrite the ending. If you enjoyed the story of Marcus Johnson, I hand-picked the next story that you will enjoy. Please don't miss this one. Click here to watch it.